Think your landlord is greedy? My Crassus would watch your house burn down and hand you a contract before the flames went out.
Imagine your apartment building catches fire in the middle of the night. You run outside in your underwear with your family. Everything you own is burning. And then a man walks up to you, calm as a banker, and offers to buy your property. Right now, tonight. For 10% of what it was worth yesterday morning. You say no. He shrugs, turns to his private fire brigade standing behind him with full buckets of water, and tells them to wait. They will put out the fire only after you sign. That man was real. His name was Marcus Crassus. He was the richest person in Roman history. And he built his fortune on a business model so predatory that your modern landlord is still running a polite version of it 2,000 years later. Ancient Rome had a catastrophic housing problem. Over 1 million people packed into a city designed for a fraction of that. Most of them lived in insulae, towering apartment blocks, 5 to 7 stories high, built cheaply from wood and mud brick by developers who cared about profit and nothing else. The ground floors were solid stone, reserved for wealthy tenants or shops. The higher you climbed, the worse it got. Thinner walls, no running water, no toilets. Entire families crammed into single rooms with no windows. And these buildings burned constantly. Rome had no organized public fire department. Open flames for cooking and heating in overcrowded wooden structures meant fires broke out almost daily. When one insula caught, the flames jumped to the next. Entire neighborhoods could vanish in an afternoon. Thousands of Romans lived in permanent fear of waking up to smoke. Crassus saw a business opportunity where everyone else saw a disaster. He purchased approximately 500 slaves and trained them as architects and firefighters. This was Rome's first and only private fire brigade. When a fire broke out, Crassus and his team would arrive at the scene before anyone else. But they did not start working. First, Crassus would approach the owner of the burning building and the owners of every neighboring property and offer to buy their land at a fraction of its value. If you sold, his crew would immediately begin fighting the fire. If you refused, they stood and watched your property burn to the ground. Then, he would buy the ashes for even less. After acquiring the land, Crassus would use his slave architects to rebuild cheaply and either sell the new buildings at enormous profit or rent them out. Over time, this machine made him the largest private landowner in Rome. Ancient sources estimated his wealth at over 7,000 talents, roughly equivalent to the entire annual revenue of the Roman treasury. One man, richer than the state itself, all built on fire and desperation. But Crassus did not stop at burning buildings. He understood something that modern private equity firms rediscovered 2,000 years later. Housing is not optional. People will pay whatever you demand, because the alternative is the street. He bought property relentlessly. Not just fire-damaged lots, but any land that came cheap due to civil unrest, political seizures, or personal bankruptcy. He purchased the confiscated estates of men, executed during Sulla's proscriptions for pennies on the dollar. He loaned money at crushing interest rates and seized property when borrowers defaulted. Every crisis was inventory. Now, before you file Crassus away as ancient history, let me describe a company. This company waited for a catastrophic market crash. When millions of families lost their homes, this company stepped in with cash and bought tens of thousands of houses at deep discounts. It converted them into rental properties and charged the same families who lost their homes rent to live in them. That company is Invitation Homes, backed by Blackstone, and it did this after the 2008 financial crisis. This is not an analogy. This is the same business model with a corporate logo. In 2008, the US housing market collapsed. Prices cratered. Ordinary families lost everything, and institutional investors moved in with billions in cash. By 23 corporate landlords owned over 500,000 single-family rental homes in the United States. They use algorithms to set maximum rental prices across entire neighborhoods. They buy houses sight unseen at above asking price, outbidding families who actually want to live in them. They do not need the house, they need the asset. Crassus used fire. Wall Street used a financial crisis. The mechanism is identical. Wait for people to lose everything, then buy what they lost for a fraction of its value, then rent it back to them. And just like Rome, the system creates its own crises. Roman developers built cheap insulae because regulations were weak and enforcement was corrupt. The buildings burned because they were designed to be disposable. The fires created the opportunities that men like Crassus exploited. The predator and the disaster were part of the same ecosystem. Today, developers build luxury units instead of affordable housing because the margins are higher. Zoning laws restrict supply in the neighborhoods where demand is greatest. Short-term rental platforms pull long-term housing off the market. Each policy failure makes the crisis worse, and each crisis makes the investors richer. The fire is financial now, but the families running out in their underwear are very real. Rome eventually tried to fix it. After the Great Fire of 64 AD, Nero introduced building codes, wider streets, stone construction, maximum heights, firewalls between buildings. Some of these reforms actually worked, but they came decades too late and did nothing to address the concentration of ownership. Crassus was already dead by then, killed on a failed military campaign in Parthia, where, according to legend, the enemy poured molten gold down his throat as a final commentary on his greed. But his real estate empire survived him. The land he accumulated stayed consolidated. The renters kept renting. The system he built outlived the man. Here is the question that connects Crassus to your landlord. Housing is a human need. Everyone needs a roof. When you allow unlimited private accumulation of a resource that no one can opt out of, you do not get a free market. You get a hostage situation. Crassus understood this 20 centuries ago. He did not need to be smarter than everyone. He just needed to own what everyone needed and wait for them to get desperate enough. The next time your rent goes up for no reason, or you lose a house to a cash offer from an LLC with no face, remember, you are not experiencing a modern problem. You are living inside a Roman business model that never went out of style. So tell me in the comments, who is your Crassus? The corporation? The landlord? The platform? The policy? Name them. Be specific. The most brutal answer gets pinned. And if you want to see how Romans handled another crisis of power, how their elections were rigged, using a playbook so cynical it reads like a modern political consulting manual, click the video on your screen right now. See you in the empire.